Malcolm Gladwell wrote a great book called entitled Blink, and it talks about this. He actually became a good friend, which one of the perks of being chief is I got to meet folks that I really admired, and so he and I actually had him over to the Air House,
Oh, wow.
and this book Blink is all about how if you actually learn to trust your gut instincts over time, you'll become a better decision maker, because a lot of times your instincts that are based on, you know, so many of your life experiences, if you actually can learn to trust your gut, you'll do pretty well. And when you work against your gut because you think somebody else has got a better idea or is more informed, I can tell you that in my experience, the decisions I've made that I regret the most generally went against what I knew my gut was telling me at the time. Malcolm Gladwell talks about it. It had to do with, you know, uh, judges who made a determination on a case, seeing the person, and judges who didn't, based on sort of gut instincts. And it was rather uh, interesting, how many of the decisions they got right when they didn't, spend that, additional amount of time. So it's just interesting. Gut instincts.
It really is. And I love Malcolm Gladwell. I listened to his audiobook, Talking with Strangers, I believe that's what it's called. It's one of
Yeah.
the best audiobooks ever created because he spent all this time writing a good book, but then he spent a tremendous amount of time creating this unique audiobook experience. And that book came out like right when everyone needed to hear it the most. So, that is a phenomenal guy. That's too cool that, you got to actually hang out with him in person.
Well, it's interesting. He did Bomber Mafia, and he actually created it as an audiobook and then printed the printed version.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
a complete reversal from normal.
Mm.
Normally, you do the printed version, then you do an audiobook. He actually he actually did this one as an audiobook and then put out the print.
So the Hero's Gauntlet first question, what is a quote that you live by?
In every challenge and opportunity. That's the foundation uh, of how I look at the handling the toughest challenges. So when you get to the role of chief of staff of a service or head of a company, or or first sergeant or chief master sergeant, I mean, you get to the big jobs. Everything you work on is hard, and quite frankly, it ought to be hard. As chief of staff of the Air Force, I shouldn't have spent a minute on easy stuff. We got plenty of folks that can do easy stuff. The stuff that hit my desk was really hard. And sometimes the decision was not which one is better or worse or good or bad. All the good options were already long gone. And I was trying to find the least bad of the options available to me.
That's hard to do. That's tough.
Yeah. And it's only when again, that's the nature of the really hard decisions that we have to make. And so there were times where the obstacle just seemed overwhelming, and I would bring the staff in and I'd say, look, every challenge in life that we're handed has an embedded opportunity, and it's the job of leaders to find. And sometimes the challenge that we're given seems so overwhelming that it's impossible to see through to the opportunity, the future opportunity that will be created that would not have happened had you not gone through the tough times, right?
Mm.
And as I often would tell, especially when I was, counseling or working with, airmen who are going through disciplinaries, I'd say, hey, listen, the judge of a man or woman is not how high you fly, it's how high you bounce. And so the question is, from a character standpoint, are you ready to bounce out of this, to a better place? So every challenge we're handed has an embedded opportunity, and it's a great opportunity to bounce.
Okay. But my question about that marriage, because it's quite lengthy and it's very impressive. Hats off to you and Don. And now this is a very broad question, but I feel like it's worth asking. And that's, what is the secret to such a long and healthy marriage? Like, what has been your secret? You're so busy, your time is divided so much.
A couple of things. One, I joke and say, we're building, going to hopefully move into our dream home that we've been designing and building now for over 2 years. And I'd like to say that Dawn gets 52% of the vote because by God, she's earned it. But the other thing I'll tell you is, I'm the luckiest man in the world, right? I found my soulmate in high school. And, there's nobody in the world that I want to spend more, that I enjoy spending time with more than her. And throughout my career, from Desert Shield and Desert Storm to Allied Force to being the CFAC, we spent a lot of time separated because I was deployed a lot during my career operationally. And so now we have, we're in chapter 2. We just don't like being apart at all during the day or during trips, that I take for work that I'm doing. And so I'm the most blessed man on the planet. And the only advice that I can give is, a relationship is something you have to work at. And you got to truly care about making a relationship work. It's not something that's passive in your life. You got to work hard at it because when you do make it work, it's the greatest joy that you'll have. Right. And so I feel very blessed and looking forward to celebrating our 40th together.
Wow, that's amazing. Congrats to both of you. Seriously, it's an inspiration that, divorce has been going up, since you got married to present day. It's been steadily going up. I've experienced divorce with my parents. They've had multiple divorces. And so I'm trying to make it my mission. I have a wife of 10 years. I have a 5-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old son. I want that after my career. I want that to still be there. And so, I look at couples like you and it is an inspiration to us. So, yes, thank you for guiding us and showing us that it is possible.
And, it only gets better over time.
Absolutely.
It's fun to be married to your very best friend.
Definitely. And I saw you guys just at the Order of the Sword. Second time I got to meet y'all. Dawn said she remembered me. I like to believe she did. Order of the Sword, the enlisted thank you to an officer, supremely rare. I've been in 18 years, never seen one, never until yours. And I was not going to miss it. And I have the coin to prove it. This is probably the rarest coin that I own because if you weren't there, you don't have it. And so the Order of the Sword coin, absolutely beautiful ceremony. That welcome in that you had with everyone lined up was you could just feel the love in the room. And so, question to you, your thoughts on the Order of the Sword.
It is without question the absolute highlight of my entire career. And incredibly humbling because when you approach leadership as a servant leader and you feel like leadership is it's a gift that's offered by those that you're privileged to serve in these leadership positions. And so to have the enlisted force, thank me was very humbling. And I can't thank the enlisted force enough, not for the Order of the Sword, but for what they did to raise me. Every time I was in every forum I was in, I would always recognize the chiefs and the senior NCOs, and I'd say, hey, I just want to say thank you for the officers you're raising, because I don't believe there's a single successful officer that wasn't raised by great NCOs. And especially chiefs have this code they use when they're about to teach something, and it normally goes a little bit like this: hey, sir, with all due respect, and when they start that way, man, something good's coming and you better pay attention. And I had a lot of those conversations, a lot of those flight line walks, You know, for Donna and I, that night was just surreal. It was one of those few moments, I would say, where, you know, as I was sitting there and I'm looking out at the crowd, and you know, and so many folks I had a chance to serve with, and there were so many retired chiefs that were able to make it for the event. And I wish there was a way to sort of to stop the world spinning for a little bit, you know, just to truly savor that moment for as long as possible. So I'm in awe of our enlisted force, and it was a very, very humbling evening for me.
That's awesome. And I'm so blessed that I got to see it in person. Because it's a special event, but also because it was you. I served for you, with you, you know, like, you know, the longer I've been in, the more I realize that, like, the leaders that I'm paired with, like you, Chief Wright, Chief Bass, that's my leaders. Like, I'm gonna retire, and they're gonna retire, and there's gonna be different chief of staff of the Air Force, different chief master sergeant of the Air Force. But while it's special that while I'm in, it's you guys. You know what I mean? And I never really saw it that way until, you know, I've been in for a hot minute, and then I really started to grow to appreciate who I'm paired with, who my boss is, because that's what I got. You know what I mean? It's not going to be forever. And so I wanted to thank you personally too. When I look at you, when I looked at Chief Wright, I just saw people who cared. I mean, I saw people who really cared. I got that. I saw you at AFA speak. I went to the AFA before COVID hit. Um, and I was just blown away by how much you cared. And that's when it kind of hit me that that's core to what we need to lead. That's the foundation. I feel like if we genuinely care, then all those other things we're going to figure out. But it has to start with giving a crap. And when I looked at you and Chief Wright, I saw hope. I really did. So I want to thank you too, personally.
Thanks. You know, there was when I talk about to young leaders and young commanders, especially, and senior NCOs, I'd always tell them, hey, there's a mirror check that we ought to have every day as leaders. And on this journey to become an inspirational leader of character, which is a journey I think we all should be on, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that you actually never arrive. I'm still working on it. You know, we're all working on this forever, right, to become better men and women, right? And the mirror check is 3 key words that I've used throughout my time as chief and throughout my career and even now, which is, am I worthy? Those are the most important 3 words for a leader. Am I worthy of the trust and the confidence of those I'm privileged to lead? Because it's an incredible gift. And it's a gift that can be lost in a second of indiscretion, a second of, breakdown in character. Leaders are in a fishbowl, and from the moment they leave their front door and step into the public eye, they're watched, they're listened to, everything they say, everything they do. And leaders, servant leaders of character ought to welcome that, because every moment you're out and about, there's an opportunity to teach and to inspire. And so, the only answer to that question, am I worthy, that I found, realistic is, God, I hope so. I
Definitely.
hope I'm living my life in a way that is an inspiration to others. And I hope that, that I'm worthy of the trust of the greatest treasure in our nation's arsenal, right? Which is the young men and women who have signed up to serve.
Absolutely. And I feel like you and Chief Wright, really understood that level of responsibility. I really did. And I can't thank you guys enough for pouring your heart and soul into us.
Chief Wright is my, he's one of my best friends. And what's interesting about Chief is he and I had actually never met before I interviewed him.
Wow.
He came as a recommendation from a friend of mine, and I wanted to meet him. And he had the job before lunch was over.
Wow.
Because, quite frankly, he came in with really low expectations of actually getting the job, because he hadn't been a command chief for very long, and we didn't know each other. And so, he was just himself, and we had so much fun, the 4 of us, because Don and Tanya were there. We had lunch at the Air House. We had so much fun. None of us wanted it to end, and the chemistry was just so great. And it was a fun call when I called him and said, "Well, Chief, what do you think about becoming the next Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force?" I won't tell you his response in public, but it was great.
That's incredible. You guys made an incredible team. I definitely saw the cohesion 100%. And I think that y'all really changed the game because, just as from an airman's point of view, just with the whole Air Force, the way you immersed yourself and kind of gave us your point of views in such unique and different ways with social media to the incredible presentations at AFA. I've never seen anything like that. That had my full buy-in. From that point forward, I was fired up after that AFA. I mean, in the way that you connected with the Air Force, it was just unprecedented, in my opinion. So I think y'all truly raised the bar and changed the game from that point on.
Well, like I said earlier, I mentioned in the beginning that we're talking about marriage. Well, there's relationships that you need to invest in as a leader because they're so important to the institution. Next to my relationship with the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, which I always found was the most important, the force to know that we were one team, that he had my ear, that we traveled together, that we truly enjoyed spending time together, that we thought similarly, but not always alike. There were times where I was looking to go right, and he'd do that chief thing. Hey, sir, with all due respect, let me tell you a little bit about what this looks like from the eyes of an airman, right? And we'd end up going left because, quite frankly, that was the right way to go. And so, we used to joke. We'd have, we had sleepovers, where he would come to the Air House and, we'd sit out by the fire pit and we would joke and say we'd solve world hunger and take no notes, and it was just that kind of a relationship, something I still treasure to this day. And he and I are, best friends to this day.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it was really cool to see him and Chief Pineiro, at your table. That whole table was just people that you loved, and you could clearly see that at the Order of the Sword. So, it's very humbling to see, what the end of a career looks like, the relationships that you've built.
I'll tell you my favorite Diamond One story with Manny real
okay.
quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So we, the three of us traveled to Puerto Rico after the massive hurricane hit there. And the unit was hurting because they just lost a C-130 and 9 airmen, just tragic. And so the unit was really hurting and, help them get back on their feet. And luckily, early in the visit, I think or maybe it was Chief Wright introduced, Chief Pineiro. And he walks out and immediately starts speaking Spanish. And you watch the whole body language change. It was great that Chief Wright and I were there, but Manny was the man, And so I looked over at Chief Wright and I said, okay, I know our job for the rest of our tour. Our job is to introduce Manny and get out of the way.
And it helps that he has a heart of gold.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
Yeah, there's just something about that guy that is just special. So I'm not surprised at all to hear that. He literally flew in and saved the day there. Yeah, shout out to Manny. Okay, so I would like to. I know so many people know this story, but there's a lot of new folks that don't. But I was hoping to take it back to Lieutenant Colonel Goldfein. Back in Serbia, flying that jet, because it's your life and the things that happen to you are what movies are based on, right? Like the movies Behind Enemy Lines, Top Gun, all those, fantasy things that we don't typically see. You've actually lived to tell the story. And it's very, very unique perspective that I know it must have given you. And I was hoping to kind of hear how that day went down.
So I'll start with why there's no movie, right? So I told somebody asked me one time, I says, hey, if they do a movie on this thing, who's going to play you? And I said, well, if you can't get Danny DeVito, I'm not interested.
I would love that movie.
Yeah. So the shoot down, first of all, I mean, no self-respecting fighter pilot would ever brag about, getting shot down, right? So my intent that night was not to intercept an enemy missile with my aircraft.
Right.
But once it happened, the first thing I'll tell you is that it's a funny thing about our training. Sometimes we can train and compartmentalize what we've learned and then have it available for recall when we need it. Now think about this. I went through survival SEER training in 1979 at the Air Force Academy. I was shot down in 1999.
Wow.
So everybody can do the math, right?
That's a pretty large gap of, training versus the event.
But here's what's interesting. As I was in the chute on my way down, all of that training kicked into gear and I knew exactly what to do. It was there. I knew exactly the steps they teach you once you're in the parachute, right? I knew how to evade when I got on the ground. I just remembered, what I'd gone through. I hadn't called on that information for 20 years. It's just a funny thing about our training. We're the best trained force in the world, and that's one of the reasons why. And then, once I got on the ground and gathered up, and by the way, it was interesting too. So when I was at the Air Force Academy, most folks know that I was not the best of students. My first 2 years of, a whopping 1.9 GPA, right? And if you had it was a funny thing at the Air Force Academy, if you had a 2.6 GPA or higher, you could qualify to do an airmanship free fall course and pull your own ripcord. Those of us who, weren't up to that grade point average, right? I jokingly went to Fort Benning and did static line jump with airborne training, got our jump wings. But that old song Garth Brooks sings, thank God for unanswered prayers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here I was at airborne training, got to know the black hats, the trainers there, some of the best in the world. And it's at airborne training at Fort Benning where you actually do a night tactical jump. It's part of the 5 jumps that you get. So I think it's the 4th jump, and it's fully combat kit, right? So you have all of your combat kit. It's middle of the night, and you're jumping into enemy territory, right? And you got to learn how to do all that. So here I am in Serbia, all these years later, and I'm now on a night jump with full combat kit into enemy territory, right? If I hadn't done airborne with the Army, I would not have been as prepared for what to do that night.
So it's like the training quite literally saved your life.
The training initially saved my life, but the PJs and the rescue team are the ones who really saved my life, right? These the folks the pilots, the folks that were in the 3 helicopters that, fought their way in to pick me up just before sunrise. After having gotten shot at, after having gone in once to the wrong location and have to go back out into Bosnia, reset, right? And then come back in again, right? As the sun is coming up to pick me up. These guys are heroes to me and always will be.
Absolutely. And it's not just about bravery. It's about their what they've dedicated their life to. I mean, to even be in the position that they were to come and save you was years and years of dedication to that craft, right? It's not just about being brave. It's about they dedicated their life to saving others so that in that moment they were ready to go.
Well, that's their motto, right? These things we do that others may live. And who knew that night they were going to bring home a father, husband, son, brother, and eventually chief of staff of the Air Force, and most importantly, pawpaw, now grandpa to 4 grandchildren, right? So who knew?
They
but
saved history in a way.
they get a bottle of scotch from me every year on the anniversary, and as many know, they're praying I live a long and healthy life.
Absolutely. Because those are some old bottles that you find too.
Yeah, single malt.
Yes, sir. So my question with that event that night, at what point was that the most like worrisome? Was it before you hit eject? Because that's kind of a miracle in itself, right? That's a dangerous situation to be in. It's not a guaranteed, lifesaver, right? Was it before you pulled the eject? Was it when you're hiding down on the ground and you hear the enemy looking for you and they're, very close by, you go to reach for your weapon, realize it fell out and it's in a field somewhere and you don't have it, so your only choice is to hunker down and hide? What was the most intense point of that whole ordeal?
Yeah, I'd say when the three Serbian folks out looking for me, came within, a few meters of me when I was, hunkered down, hiding from them. That was pretty stressing because, remember, I wasn't a captain. I was the squadron commander who got shot down on my flagship. So I'd have been a pretty nice prize for them if they could have gotten me and, taken me in for questioning, what have you. So that was a pretty stressful moment. But, my guardian angels have been hard at work throughout my life, and they have, matter of fact, I think they're upstairs suing for a transfer, for all the things they've had to save me from. But they were there for sure with me that night. I know for sure without any question. I think the other probably part that was a little stressful was when so I shared the story that a buddy of mine from during Desert Storm had jumped out in Iraq. And when I was debriefing him after his rescue, he'd been 6 hours on the ground in Wadi. I said, "Hey, Spike, man, what'd you do to keep your sanity? You could see the Iraqis out in the distance looking for you. What'd you do to keep your cool?" And he said, "Oh, fingers, man." He goes, "So I knew I was getting out, so I started collecting rocks to take them, as souvenirs for my kids, because I wanted to have souvenirs from Iraq, And I remember thinking, my God, that's Father of the Year, Well, here I am 10 years later, I'm on the ground, and I thought, well, now's my chance. So I'm collecting rocks for my daughters, so they can have souvenirs, and putting them in my G suit pocket. And all of a sudden, what turned out to be an animal started coming up the ravine from behind, and I heard it. And it got to the point where I didn't know, I couldn't see it because it was really dark, but, got close enough where I grabbed this pile of rocks that I was collecting and threw it at this thing, and it reared up and growled at me, and I joke and say Jesse Owens, couldn't keep up with me as I left that perfect spot, right? I'm pretty convinced it was a Serbian, grizzly bear or mountain lion or something like that, but there are many who tell me they were sure it's a Serbian field mouse.
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
But no, how terrifying. You're not only hiding from the enemy who is earshot away, but now there's a potential bear predator, hunting you. I mean, the situation, the more I thought about it, the more surreal it really seemed. But you're living proof that it actually happened. In those moments where it's life or death, we're like intensely aware, right? It's the adrenaline's flowing. And I think it's kind of surprising, like what kind of thoughts you have in those moments. What kind of thoughts were you having? Who were you thinking about? Or were you trying to not think about those things?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I was thinking hard about not screwing up. And I say that because when I fought in Desert Storm, we lost a couple of helos, and we had folks that died trying to rescue others. The nature of that business, it's high risk, big lumbering helicopter, and you're right in the heart of the envelope for the threats, right? And the last thing I wanted to do was somehow screw up in a way that I put other lives at risk, trying to get me out. So I needed to I needed to get my part right. And so I was very careful about, how often I used the radios. I was very careful about not, of hiding and not being seen. And probably one of the most, it was a stressing moment, but not from a fear standpoint, but from actually a frustration standpoint, because I'd stayed off the radio so long, sort of trying to judge on my own, and I had other capabilities of communicating. That when I came back on the radio to check in, they told me that the rescue team was in country and searching for me. And I thought, God, somehow I have screwed this up, because they shouldn't be searching for me. I've been transmitting my position. Something's gone wrong. And it was just my gut that told me, God Almighty, I'm putting other people at risk here. And so at that point, I broke radio silence, and luckily I heard the helicopters in the distance very faintly, and I was able to vector them in. At that point, it was pretty much a Vietnam era rescue, you know.
Wow.
Technology was great, but I was, given the, hey, come east, turn south, come east, right? And I vectored them right to my location. And then,
Wow.
the funny part, of course, is I jump up in the helicopter, but he had to keep, the pilot had to keep one wheel off the ground because of the slope that we were on. And I was having a hard time getting on the helicopter because I had these doggone rocks in my G suit that I'd been getting for my kids,
Did any of those rocks make it?
No, they all fell out of my G suit pockets. And then of course I had to give all my gear when I arrived. And so I wasn't thinking enough to do it. But I spent enough time in Iraq in the later years. I was able to get plenty of rocks.
Right. So what was happening at this point in time?
I think that's yeah, we're just getting lit up.
Hammer 3 defending 060 mud. Mud 3 just took a hit. Hammer 1 defending. Mud 3 just took a hit. Crack 3 defending. Roger, let's head west. I've taken hit. I'll be getting out of the airplane. I'm going to continue to glide as long as I can. Start finding me, boys.
Right. Well, I definitely want to tell you that, me listening to it, it feels like an intense situation. And, because of you and the team that saved you, you went on to build an incredible legacy for us all. So, I just want to tell you, I'm proud of you for getting through that, for being able to share that story, with others. And I'm proud of the team that saved you.
Yeah, me too. They're incredible. We just had a reunion last year. It was pretty cool at Hurlburt, and we got a chance. There was about 8 of us that all got together and got a chance to, what happens over the years is the stories get much, much better, right? And bigger and better over the years. And so, I owe my life to these guys. I say guys because we didn't have women in special ops. I'll tell you, I'm really proud of the fact that we fixed that, since. But I'm really proud of these guys, and they're good friends.
You as a lieutenant colonel went through this very traumatic experience. You lived to tell the tale, and you went on to do amazing things. You became the 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I know that this is a very loaded question, right? But when I say the most memorable moments as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, what comes to mind when I ask such a broad question?
Yeah, without question, the most memorable times were with airmen. And one of the things I loved doing as chief was, because I'm second generation, my dad was Air Force fighter pilot Vietnam, and my daughter's third generation Air Force serving now. I used to always, when I talk to folks, and I'd always ask them, a couple questions. I'd say, hey, first question is, hey, tell me your story. What brought you in? And I loved hearing the story about, what caused this individual to join the Air Force. And then if in the story, an airman shared, and, my mom or my dad, was in the Air Force, I said, oh, really? When do they retire? And sometimes it was, well, they're still in. Oh, great. Are they still with us? Oh, yes, sir. I said, you got your cell phone? Let's call
No.
them. And I did this I still do it to this day. I did it 3 nights ago.
Wow.
And it was so much fun, and I always tell them, hey, don't tell them who's calling. Just say, you got somebody here who wants to talk to you, and then we get on FaceTime, whatever. And I'd check in with them. And a lot of times with people I knew, and I
Right.
say, hey, I'm just standing here with Jesse or Josh or Jane or Betty. I just want to know they're doing great, and really proud of them and proud to serve with them. So those moments were great. There was one that I'll never forget from Afghanistan. Time change, and it was actually somebody I knew whose son was over in Bagram. I said, okay, let's call. And so we call. And of course, this guy gets on before I'm on there. He goes, man, what are you doing? It's 3:00 in the morning. Are you okay? Is everything going on? Is everything okay? And of course, says, yeah, Dad, everything's okay. Well, what in the hell are you doing? Calling me at 3:00 in the morning. And of course, right then I grabbed the phone and I said, hey.
You're like, I'll take over from here. Hey, it's me.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the time change might freak them out. That's a good call, grabbing that phone from his fingers. But no, getting to know the airmen, those are the moments that stick with you the most. When they are the mission, they're what's making this machine run. So you get what you give. So you invest in them, they're going to invest in you, they're going to invest in the mission. And I think you got that. So at your very core, you were never above spending time with any airman. Anyone could clearly see that. And they're kind of expected to ask you all the questions when really they don't even get a chance to talk, because you're sitting there asking them about their life, their legacy, their why. And I really think that's beautiful. And I think that's what that special touch that you brought as the chief of staff.
Well, and again, that was also Chief Wright, who just had this incredible connection with airmen. And I love traveling with him. The story, you heard the story at War of the Sword that I shared, which, I got this young airman, who's staring at Chief Wright. Man, can't believe that Chief Wright's really here at Bagram. And he grabs my sleeve, and he goes, without looking at me, he just says, he goes, hey, will you take a picture with me and the chief? I said, you bet, man, let me have your phone. I got this. It was just great.
And then he sees who's taking the picture eventually.
Yeah. I said, yeah, hey, focus. I was pointing at the stars, right? My OCP. And I said, hey, man, focus right here. It was great.
And I kind of, it's funny that you told that story. And then I found myself in a kind of similar situation that night. I'm in line to meet you and your wife. And there's an airman or a young staff sergeant in front of me. He's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Chief Wright's there. I've been in for a little bit now. I've never got to see him. This is the first time I've seen him. And I was like, why don't you just meet him? He's like, I don't know. I don't think that would be. I was like, man, come on, let's go. We cut out the line. And I'm like, Chief Wright, this guy's been wanting to meet you for years. And so we cut out the line, got him the photo, and it was a beautiful moment. So how fitting that you told that story on the same night that I kind of did the exact same thing. And the last topic I wanted to talk about, because it's not often talked about, was the value of the military spouse, and how they're such a foundational part of our success as a force, and so much that they provide their flexibility, foregoing some of their own career aspirations, the moving. They just do so much for us. I just wanted to take some time to acknowledge them, say thank you to them, and hear your thoughts on why the military spouse is so important in our community.
Yes, our spouses, they exhibit a very special kind of courage, I think, when they, endure some of the hardships associated with military duty, right? The long hours, the deployments, the separations, the things that we do, because defending the nation is hard. It's always been hard. It always will be hard. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to the military spouses who often give up, as in my case with Dawn, often give up some of their dreams to allow us to pursue ours. And, I used to say that, there's there's a lot of things we got to get right as leaders, and in most we do the best we can. But there's one thing we've got to get right that's nothing short of a moral obligation, and that is we got to make sure that every airman we send in harm's way that's entrusted to our care is properly organized, properly trained, properly equipped, and courageously led by a leader of character, a servant leader of character. And that when they go forward to do the nation's business, we take care of their families while they're gone. Everything else, hey, let's do the best we can. But this part, we got to get right. And so, taking care of those families is, I think, is nothing short of a moral obligation for leaders. And as I told commanders, there's certain things you can delegate. Taking care of the families entrusted your care is not one. That's commander business and command chief business. And
Wow.
So we're pretty blessed, I think, with military spouses that serve in a way that we can serve.
Absolutely. And I've met some of the winners. That I think there's like an annual competition of sorts. And oh my goodness, you just learn about, or you go to AFA and there's the spouse panel and you see all the things they're doing. It's just unbelievable, the stuff that they're able to pull off. It is just surreal, how many incredible spouses that we have out there vouching for us and showing up for us. So thanks for sharing that, sir. And as we come to a close here, I told you there's a few questions. So I'm gonna go off your good buddy, Chief Pineiro here. Let's see what he asks. This is the first time I've read this. So he has two questions. The first question he has is, how do you make time count?
Manny is, he is really inspirational, and, not counting time, but making time count is his way of thinking. It's, I've got his t-shirt I wear when I work out. Right. And, very often I would get asked the question, hey, how do you achieve balance in your life? And I tell everybody, especially, young airmen, I'd say, well, here's what I can tell you. First of all, it's not a math equation. If you try to make it a math equation, you're going to be very disappointed and frustrated, because the amount of waking hours you spend at work defending the nation is going to far exceed the amount of waking hours you spend at home. The math will never work. The only way I've found to achieve balance is through a focus on presence. When you're home, be home. When you're at work, be at work. That sounds easy. Electronic devices has made that incredibly hard, right? How many of us, will get to the kids if we can just get to the last few emails, right? Or, even though you're physically at home, you're mentally at work, because, and again, you've got this BlackBerry or, iPhone or whatever that's keeping you connected to work when you should be at home. If we can just be successful at being present wherever we are. So when you step across the threshold in your home, be home, be 100% there and present at home. And then when you get at work, be at work. If you can do that, that's probably the best advice I can give on achieving balance.
No, I love that.
And making time count.
And making time count. The last question, his last question. He says, what does he consider his ultimate win as our 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force?
Of course, it was picking him to be the diamond one, right? I don't know. I'm not sure that an individual win is any kind of win worth talking about, right? The wins that matter are team wins, right? That we accomplished. I think the way we handled ourselves after George Floyd, I think the way we approached that, Chief Wright and I, and Manny, I think the way we as a team handled COVID, because as this, we're the service that the nation relies on for a lot of things that affect daily life in America, right? And we're not going to get a pass because of COVID. You know, it wasn't like the American people were going to wake up one morning and not have GPS. You know, that was going to be something that was provided 24/7, 365 without a single, microsecond hiccup. It wasn't like the American people were going to wake up one morning and give us a pass on being protected by our nuclear deterrent, given the fact that we had 2 of the 3 legs. That was our responsibility. The American people weren't going to wake up one morning and accept the fact that we no longer had global mobility. So we had to find a way to deliver without a pause in a global pandemic. And I'll tell you what, talk about commanders stepping up. We had invested so much time and energy in making sure that at the squadron level of command, that commanders knew that we had their back and that they were, not only free to make decisions and take risk, but expected. And I used to always tell them, say, don't wait for me. I don't actually add value to most decisions. I just add time, so move out, take risk, take charge. And boy, when the pandemic hit, man, that was probably one of our great successes, was the fact that we had commanders across the Air Force and command chiefs, those command teams, which I used to always call it's the commander, the senior NCO, and the senior lead spouse, right? Man, did they step up. And we delivered for the nation during one of the toughest challenges we've faced in our history. So I'd say those are a couple of team wins I'm pretty proud of.
So, coming to a close here, sir, I know you go by JD now, just Dave. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending time with Team Hero Front with me, learning all about, your views, your life. We don't often sit down like this in one-on-one and have these discussions and for you to take time to do that, it means the world to me. I know so many people are going to love hearing about you, your life, your philosophy. And so I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to thank Buck for setting this up. He's an incredible guy, hell of a master sergeant, Buck Holloway. So shout out to Buck. He's on here as well. And so just thank you tremendously to the both of you for making this incredible conversation happen. Thank you, sir.
No, thanks, Josh, for doing it. Best decision I've ever made since retirement was asking Buck to join me. So thanks for recognizing him as well, and good luck with the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Hey, I'm gonna give you a salute too.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Bye-bye.